What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Leaders of Leaders podcast. I've got a doozy of a guest for you guys today. I am honored to present and talk with Kyle Gillette. He currently lives in the Pacific Northwest. What's up? Me too. I'm in North Idaho. He's a little further over, but with his family, he spent his earlier days in California. He combined experiences from growing up on an orange grove to running a young men's mentoring program to having a leadership role in a senior living facility. And that led him to where he is today, coaching small business owners to become better leaders. And what better place than the Leaders of Leaders podcast to talk about what that means? He enjoys hiking, CrossFit, and spending time with his wife and 3 daughters. Kyle, thanks so much for hopping on the show.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much. I'm excited to share about my insights and also learn from you too.
Yeah, man. Well, I have a feeling that we're just going to showcase the heck out of you, but if I play a small role that helps, that would be cool. But that I'm hoping to learn about this sage mindset thing that I've kind of looked up and kind of perused into, but really would like to kind of unpack. Okay, what is better, right? If I'm a leader or if I'm an owner of something and I have a sphere of influence, what's better and how is this sage mindset thing helping me?
Awesome. Let's dive in for sure.
So let's say I own a business. I have some sphere of influence, or I'm a father of 3 kids, just like yourself. And I'm like, hey, Kyle, uh, uh, let's let let's make me a better leader because I feel like I'm falling short. What what it, what would you offer in terms of the sage mindset?
Yeah, so Sage has been an interesting journey because well, it's actually in the middle of a new turn. I'm gonna have to change the name, unfortunately. I really like the
Oh,
name. I'm gonna have to change it to something different based on some stuff that's happening. But uh, the principles remain the same. The pillars remain the same. It came out of my experience working at that men's mentoring program, being raised in a family of small business owner, and I remember it was a 3 a.m. wake up call from God that He woke me up and then gave me the word self awareness. And that was the word I needed to combine all these other ideas that I had at that time. And the goal was I wanted to create a framework, a leadership framework that was mine and I could do whatever I wanted with. I could talk about it, I could do courses on it, I could do workshops, etc. And that was the word that triggered the rest of the acronym. And I like to explain it like a metaphor. And the metaphor is of a leadership house. And
mm,
if self-awareness is the foundation of that leadership house, accountability is the nails that holds the
oof,
leadership house together.
you know it.
Growth is the walls and the roof. And it's also the inside a little bit where you need to change. You adjust the furniture, you move things around, you adjust the way that you lead. And then empowerment is the windows and doors. And the idea is that people are watching you and they're wanting to join you because they see how well that you're leading other people and influencing other people. And they knock on that door and they say, hey, can I come in? Can I be led by you? Or can I get your services? Can I become a customer of you? And you empower your team and you of course empower the people that are interested in being influenced by you to get what they need from it. So that is a very small nutshell of what Sage is and how it came about.
Yeah. So, like we were talking about earlier, just very shortly before this, on Leaders of Leaders, one, I believe that Jesus Christ is the leader of leaders, and you can see his impact wasn't necessarily while he was walking and exempling on the earth, although he did, you know, feed thousands of people and wow thousands of people with miracles and things like that. But really, his impact came generationally, right? His legacy obviously has left an indelible imprint and continues to grow, right? 2,000 years after
Right.
he was a man on this earth, a God man, but a man nonetheless still on this earth, born, right? And we're right now coming into Advent. When this publishes, we'll be post Advent and celebrating this new year. And so if we're unapologetically believers in Christ and disciples in Christ here on Leaders of Leaders podcast, and you were sharing with me that you just actually preached at your church, which I think is radtastic. What is, so if I'm a Christian leader now, more specifically, how is this not robbing me from what God is calling me into, or how is this actually maybe even empowering me to do God's will in my life, to follow Christ, as I'm just doing marketplace stuff, right? Going and making sales and doing business and serving other people.
Yeah, I love that question. I've never been asked a question like that about Sage because most podcasts I've been on aren't opening themselves up to me being able to answer a question like that. So let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you a quick story about the vision that God gave me for my business, and then I'll answer specifically how Sage ties into your walk with
Love it.
Jesus. So I was listening to a book called it's by author last name Quick. I can't remember the name of the book for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
but I was driving in my car and I'd been already working for a long time, for months, on what's the vision for my business? What's this big lighthouse vision of where God is taking my business, praying and hoping and wishing that I could get some clarity there.
Mm.
Listening to the book, and it starts talking about vision as well. And so I turn off the book as I'm driving my car on the way back home, and I'm like, God, what is it? What is the vision that you have for me? And of course, I've been battling for a long time, so he's no genie, but he happened to answer the prayer in that moment. And the answer was he wants me to help thousands of business owners shift their mindsets and habits so that he can transform their hearts.
Mm.
And it hit me so hard with clarity. And then I spent the rest of the drive crying because it was like beautiful to me. It was the vision that he has for my business. And so what did that turn into? Well, that turned into shaping this book, this framework even more clearly. It turned into a bunch of mindsets and habits that
Mm.
I've described in the book in detail, described in podcasts in detail. But how does that all tie to your walk with Jesus? Well, if there's anything I've learned from last night, it's that my self awareness and self control isn't where it could be. Right. So I had a little bit of a rough night with my kids last night, which was about 95% my fault. But if you're a
Hey,
sage
you're
leader,
owning it. That's the accountability piece right there.
amen, exactly. But if you're a sage leader, the foundation is self-awareness. And God wants us to know ourselves as deeply as possible because he created us in our mother's wombs. He intimately knows us. He knows the hairs on our head, right? All that stuff. And so why wouldn't one of the first pillars of leadership be to know yourself as best as you can?
Mm.
Then following that is, who are you going to be accountable to ultimately? Well, sure, I want to be accountable to myself, but ultimately I'm accountable for this life and forever to God and how I live this life. And so if God gives me this vision, if he gives you this vision, if he gives you this team of people to lead, this family to lead,
Mm-hmm.
then the pillar of accountability is the nails that keeps your leadership house, or in other words, the temple that God gave you, together. Without that accountability, and we all have the greatest accountability partner in the universe to lean ourselves onto. And then,
Yeah.
of course, God doesn't want us to stay static. He wants us to grow. And then he empowers us to get there. And I'm kind of briefly touching on those two, so I give you a chance to talk. But that's what I would say is how Sage fits into the walk of a believing leader.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love that. I mean, and the fruit of the spirit, right? Peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Right. And so it's like, well, yeah, I don't think that God put us on this earth so that we didn't know ourselves, so that we didn't, know him better, uh, and then walk out what he's calling us into, right? In terms of vision that you're talking about. Um, with this lack of understanding of who we are and who he is, and how that interplays in our current physical reality that we find ourselves in. And speaking of reality, did it happen to be, was it Jim Quick,
Yeah,
Limitless, the book
yeah.
Limitless? Yeah, so good. And well, you said Quick, and I was like, I thought James, and I was like, no, I don't, it's not James. What is it? So I cheated, I looked it up.
Oh,
So
good, good. Thank you. Well, it's good. It's
yeah.
a good book. It's one of those. It's a it's very long, and they're like every single self-help thing that you could think of is in that book. So if
Right,
you're
right,
looking for
exactly.
self-help, there's a great book to reference for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But a lot of the things that you're talking about, right? Like and habits and things like that. And I loved so you shared, and I was like, man, I got to write that down. Um, you said God gave me this vision. Well, God gave me this word, and then God gave me this vision, and then the 1,000 people, right? And putting there now there's people in front of you, and you're not saying, hey, be like Kyle. You're saying that God will change and improve them. And I'm certain that some of the people, like many of the podcasts that you've been on, are secular, maybe non-believers. And so I love that there's biblical truths, biblical principles to the self-awareness, to the accountability, to the growth, to the empowerment, and yet it's still completely accessible as people journey through this thing called life and figure out where their beliefs are, what their beliefs are. And that's just intrinsic with it. That's pretty incredible. I
I mean,
wanted to, oh, go ahead. Yep.
just real quick, one of the things that I teach a lot is coaching. Like I coach people, and that's
Mm-hmm,
my profession, but I also teach people how to coach. And really the fundamentals of coaching is in James, where it says everyone should be slow to speak or quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And that's when it comes to the workplace. It's
mm-hmm,
really easy and home life, but it's
mm-hmm.
really easy to be quick to speak and quick to get angry, right? And anger,
Absolutely.
when I say it here, is pretty subtle. Typically, it's that frustration, it's that irritation, it's that
Mm-hmm,
talking to the coworker because you're frustrated, talking to another colleague because you're frustrated because your employee isn't doing what they want to do, what you want them to do.
mm-hmm.
But when you think about it from that verse's perspective and a biblical perspective, we're we're to start by being slow to speak. Well, what does it mean to be slow to speak? Well, it means to be really observant,
Mm-hmm.
and it means to pay attention to how your interaction with that person is impacting them, and how their interaction with you is impacting you. And then from that, listen deeply to the person and be deeply curious about that creation that God made that's in front of you that you're leading. And listen deeply to what they have to say. And I don't mean words, I mean everything about them.
Yeah.
Trust your intuition, trust the spirit he leads you. So that's be quick to listen, and then slow to speak is a big part of coaching. In that, how many times do we just lead people to a solution as we're leading? We say, "Oh, this is what you should do. Have you tried this? Have you tried that?" Yeah. Instead, you ask powerful questions like Jesus did of his disciples. He asked powerful questions and made them think. And when that happens, now all of a sudden your employee, you're fully engaging them, because
Yeah.
we're not a body, we're a soul, we're a mind, we're far more than just the physicality. And when you as a leader engage that part of the person, now you're really honoring that creation, you're really honoring that person powerfully. And then in that process, you begin to love that person a lot easier because you listen to them, you study them, you can love them. And then it's a lot harder to get mad at someone that you love and you
Yeah.
deeply care for. And when you do get mad, it's a lot easier to repent and to turn from that way of acting towards them and speaking towards them. So fundamentally, within the idea of empowerment and within the idea of coaching people, because that's where I put the mindset of coaching,
Mm-hmm.
you have that verse. That's really the heart of what empowerment does and is.
Man, man, there's so much there. Yeah, and didn't God give us two eyes and two ears and one mouth, right? It's like that cliche, but absolutely true saying. It's like, okay, well, maybe you work with that creation instead of the opposite. Which, man, I mean, you're holding me accountable with your own words there. It's
So,
like, oh, you're right.
so you said that, and it made me think about how. So we have neurons in our brains and
Hmm.
synapses and all these connections and billions of cells and et cetera. But we also have those neurons on our heart and in our gut.
Mm,
And we need to pay attention to that because God speaks to us through our minds, and our mind is works because of the neurons in us. And so when you feel something in your gut or your heart and you just get this notion, often it's because God is using that physical connection in your body to speak to you. And there's a lot less neurons in those two locations than there are in our brain. But there's something going on there because you said two eyes and two ears, and I totally agree. But then
Mm-hmm.
we also have these other connections to God that are in other places in our bodies, and you get that. I intuitively thought that, or my heart said, well, yes, we know that the heart can be wicked and deceitful, but God speaks to those parts of us as well. And I think that as leaders, we got to trust, first of all, check with God in the moment, but also there's something to trusting that moment in your heart and that moment in your gut. Anyway, I just had to mention that because it was a fascinating thing that I learned about how our bodies actually function and how the neurons aren't just in our brains.
No, 100%. Well, I think about, my own testimony, and I'm not going to share it on here. But the inner witness of the Holy Spirit was this overwhelming experience for me, unforgettable. And yet I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything audibly, right? It was completely felt, and there was a knowing, an inner knowing, but it wasn't like I was intellectually processing, right? It was like, oh, and then there's that, and then and like data collecting and then categorizing it in my brain. It was just this overwhelming experience for me, and it just gave me the goosebumps even thinking about it again right now. But that's what that's how powerful it was, and it was like, man, this is unforgettable and undeniable as well, and yet it wasn't like Moses in the burning bush. I didn't see a burning bush that wasn't actually burning up and charring. I didn't see, I didn't hear a still small voice, right, audibly. I didn't see a whirlwind. There was no flames. Like there was no like incredible observable data points, but it was completely observable, right? In that it was beset upon my physiology and I would say my spirit, if I can, or on my mind, which is exactly what you're alluding to, right? It's like it's
Yep.
more than just eyes and ears, but it's also those things too, right?
Yes. Yep. Totally. I have an interesting, or I have a similar salvation story in terms of the way that God spoke to me in it, and I'd like to, because I've tried to figure out how to describe when I get that intuitive thought from God.
Mm,
And I have come to conclude that the way I like to say it is it's a thought that's not my own.
mm,
It cannot be my own. When it
mm,
comes to me like that, that is either too brilliant or too out of the box or too simple for it to be my thought, and it's perfect for the situation.
yeah.
And I talk about that in the book as well, because I talk about tuning into your intuition as part of self-awareness, and that there are four channels of communication, and if you can learn how to tune into those four, it can develop really phenomenal levels of self awareness. But one of those that some people are afraid of is that intuitive,
Mm,
to, tuning into the intuitive, because I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but the short of it is we're distracted, right? But when you can realize that that thought that you had is not your own, and you're tuned into the spirit, you're probably hearing God speak to you, and you should probably listen.
yeah, right. Yeah, and then there's ways, in accountability and with other people and whatnot, where you can confirm and through scripture it's like,
Yes.
okay, I'm reading the scriptures, that's not denying what I was thinking intuitively. I've got some wise counsel, or I've got a pastor, or I've got a spiritual director, or whatever the case might be. That's not denying this intuition, this intuitiveness. I've got a good coach, right? Kyle saying like, yeah, it doesn't sound to me like it's of Satan or of, this prideful selfishness. It's sounds to me like, yeah, that is a thought that is not your own, and you should
Right.
dang listen to that and pursue that. Man, that is so good. I wanted to switch gears a little bit because I was curious about your experience with you. It was the youth. What is it? Young men's, right? Running a young men's mentoring
Yeah.
program. Was this the young men's mentoring program where these people were, these young men were looked at as like hard cases or not leaders, or is that in the
Yeah.
same? Is that the same? Okay, yeah. So I want to hear from you encountering, because as a boss, as a leader, as a parent, you're going to encounter either moments or people that are going to
Mhm.
be difficult to lead, or difficult cases, or maybe, oh, I don't see any unfulfilled potential there. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
Sure.
So, yeah, talk me through, if I don't know if there's a personal story, an anecdotal story, or just general principles from that experience and from that moment. But I'd love to learn a little bit from your history, your experience with these young men, um, and potentially, have-nots or hard cases, or whatever the case, because we're going to experience seasons of this, or actually people like this, if we I guess, lean or act on the spheres of influence that God gives us, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, any day, anytime, God could bring a difficult person into our lives that are they're like sandpaper, as some people say. But this program came onto my radar when I was wrapping up college,
Mm,
and I was very stressed. I was realizing, in retrospect, now I know I was realizing that I was really afraid of being an adult. I was
mm,
22 years old. I was behind in school, 40 pounds overweight, super stressed, and not knowing what I was going to do with myself. It was just a mess. And I talked to my parents on the phone. I remember sitting at my desk and chatting with them on the phone about it, and they tried to comfort me and everything. But ultimately, God was the one that brought the comfort, because he called, or he didn't call me. A friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, there's this job opportunity at this men's mentoring program." And I'm like, "Oh, well, what is this thing?" So he explained to me it's a program called Alpha Academy, and these guys, 18 to 25, live there, and they're off track in life, and they're trying to get traction. They're trying to get their lives back in order. A lot of them have broken families, drugs and alcohol history, some jail time, just lots of tough stuff. And I'm
mm,
over here with this pretty posh life in comparison, but I'm all screwed up and lost. And I'm going, I'm not qualified, but I'm going to say yes anyway. I'm going to say yes to at least to the interview. So I drive onto the property, 20-acre property, rolling green hills on the coast of California. And I remember pulling up, and as you drive over this bridge, there's this set of chain link fences with a bunch of dogs barking at you. Well, the program ran a pet resort to support it, right? So that's later in the story, but they did. And I drove past it. And I'm like, this is weird. And then you drive up next to this lawn, and in front of you is this beautiful farmhouse. Behind you is a barn. I get out of my car, walk up to the door of the farmhouse, knock on it, and the president opens the door of the program, and not the president of the United States. President of the program opens the door and shakes my hand, welcomes me in, and then I meet the director as well. And we sit there for an hour and a half, and they interview me. The whole time, I feel like someone is putting their hands on my shoulders, on the couch that I'm sitting on, and telling me to sit here, stay here, this is where you belong. So after an
mm,
hour and a half of conversation, Jack, the president of the program and founder, says, "Do you want the job?" So crazy question, because it meant moving out of my apartment from with my best friend and a couple other dudes. It meant totally uprooting my life and living in this house for a year with these guys that are kind of in a rough place while
yeah.
I'm in a rough place. So I say yes because I'm crazy, but most importantly, I was trying to trust God. So I say yes. I ended up being in the program for 9 years, and I lived there for roughly a year, and then ran the program in varying capacities for the next 8. What did we do there that passes forward into leadership? Well, what we did is we led the unleadable, quote unquote. Most of the time, when you saw one of these guys come in, they were unleadable, or at least they seemed that way.
Mm,
What made them unleadable? Well, first of all, they never had a job. Secondly, they didn't give a rip about what you wanted them to do.
mhm.
And they hardly gave a crap about their own lives either. Right. And I'm not trying to beat them up. That's just what happened over the 150 students I saw in there, and the many, many, many of them that I employed and taught how to work. Fundamentally, what we did that is the most empowering, if you want to use one of the pillar words, I would say it was the empowering thing of, we hold you accountable to what we expect you to do, but we make it clear what we expect you to do. Because when you don't make it clear what's expected of someone, it's really hard to empower them, and it's really hard to hold them accountable. So we
Yeah.
made that very clear, from everything from checklists to handouts to conversations, whatever. It was very clear. Number two, when they didn't, we made sure they knew that they didn't, and there were consequences that mattered. And for them, because they lived there, we could create some consequences that really sucked, like you can't leave the property, or you can't go do this, or you can't do that, you can't participate in this or that. So it got serious really quickly for them. And then number two, when they did a good job, we gave them hugs, literally and metaphorically, right? So we loved them and we hugged them and we preached Jesus at them. And that, or to them, maybe not at them, but to them. I don't know what the right word is. But here's the thing, as we lead our businesses, we can do that with our employees, all of those things. We can love them by giving them clear expectations of what we want from them, giving them the resources that they need to perform, teaching them how to do it well. And then we can also hold them accountable by saying, hey, this is what was expected of you. You didn't do it. What's happening here? What went wrong here? How can we help?
Mm.
Right? And then we can preach Jesus at them by being a witness in the way that we lead and loving them deeply in the process. And a lot of that, they won't know that you're loving them deeply because you're just on your knees for them as when you're at home. And they have no clue how hard you're battling for their soul. But that's what we did for them. And that's what I do for my clients. And that's what all of us can do for the people that we lead. So there's a lot of other lessons, but those are the kind of the top level lessons learned.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think I think most issues are unclear or uncommunicated expectations. And then the follow-up one is like, not then, okay, I've clearly communicated, but I'm not actually inspecting what I expect, or I'm not holding them accountable. Like, and you put all of that in a really good package, and there's a cool, vivid imagery and picture that goes along with it, especially with the fact that it's happening with the quote unquote unleadable. But obviously, any human is unfulfilled potential,
Yeah,
in
right.
my understanding, in my estimation. And yes, some humans, like maybe these young men, are bringing with them a ton of baggage, a ton of stuff that makes it really, really difficult. So that being said, how obviously I've been hearing overtones, or maybe undertones, but I hear them as overtones because it seems like as a pattern seeking human that I am, I'm hearing this, that there's this large strain or through line of accountability and accepting responsibility, and then like you owned your mistake even last night with your kids, and I'll own now my mistake this morning with my kids that we shared with each other even before we recorded, but then since we've recorded, um how important, and we can talk about it from these young men, their standpoint, their perspective, but then also I think maybe even more importantly, any listener that has any sphere of influence, whether they're a father, whether they're a business owner, whether they're an entrepreneur, and somebody that at this point is probably curious, like, okay, is Kyle a good coach for me? Is he not a good coach for me? Should I go buy his book? Should I not go buy his book? How important is having responsibility, confessing the things that you screw up, asking for forgiveness, and maybe even forgiveness. And so I know that that's a whole lot, a bunch on that ball that I'm lobbing to you.
Yeah.
And so take it however you will, but yeah, how important is that as a leader?
Yeah, accountability is the nails, right? It holds everything together. And if you want to really go interesting with the metaphor, those nails are also what allows us to have the life that we have, because of what Jesus took the nails, right? And
Mm.
so it's just an interesting thought. I never thought that
Yeah.
before. But anyway, when I was 18, I got to college, and I was invited to join Campus Crusade for Christ. We had an enormous ministry at Cal Poly, and there's 1,000 members. It's just enormous.
Mm.
And I remember standing in my dorm room, or sitting in my dorm room, and my roommate was getting recruited by a fraternity. And
Mm.
and I was like, I could probably join a fraternity. I could probably go pledge somewhere, or I could pursue this other life. And I'm not saying if you go to a fraternity that you can't be Christian, whatever. Just for me, I couldn't have been. I absolutely could not have been. So I pursued Campus Crusade, which meant that I joined a Bible study, which meant that I got mentorship and
Mm.
accountability. And
Mhm.
so I started every week since I was 18 years old until this week, for 21 years, to have weekly or biweekly at a minimum accountability with another man or a couple other dudes.
Wow.
every single week. And why is that good for leadership, personally and professionally? Because therefore confess your sins to one another, right? The effective prayer of a righteous man accomplishes much. So, like, this is what happens in all of those interactions, both leadership wise and personally, because we share what's going on with us. But part of that, and I'll talk about the what I call the accountability pass in a minute here. But part of that is just having someone to turn to when you mess up or when you succeed and you're like, man, this was awesome. And you can share those victories and unfortunately some of those hills or those valleys, I mean, with people. But yes, 100%, we need to have that accountability. And um, without it, there's absolutely no way I would be where I am as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a business owner. Absolutely not.
So, um, yeah, well, there's a bunch of stuff even with Campus Crusades for Christ. So all these things I didn't know looking at your bio. So I'm like, wow, this is awesome. But so you're like, and I do a weekly accountability men's group, and we also have our study, and we share praise reports or prayer requests and things like that kind of follow the accountability, but the accountability is first. What do you think the difference is between a leader who, like, what can or what tends to transpire, if you've observed this or not, between a leader who has, and specifically like a father or a man that's a leader who has accountability, and then a man who is a leader, and by leader I mean from the sort of traditional sense of that word that we would hear when we hear it colloquially, like business leader, political leader, even maybe teacher, but definitely like on that business kind of front. What would be the difference? I have accountability, or he has accountability and I don't. What's going to transpire? What's going to be um, the thing that happens in the long run or short run?
Yeah. So I think ultimately, if you have accountability, well, if you don't have consistent accountability, I'll start there.
Mm-hmm.
Your business may still grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may still grow, you may still have success, but you don't know how much more success you would have if you created better accountability because you're going to have better conversations. Someone's going to point something out. They're going to show you where you might be missing something. You're going to brainstorm and mastermind things together. And that creates a very synergistic result on you as a person and secondly on your business. So without accountability, yes, your business could grow, but you might be missing out, very likely you're missing out on growth in the
Mm-hmm.
business. But more importantly, without accountability, you're missing out on personal growth. I have a client that he's a good guy, but he doesn't have very much accountability. And I'm like his accountability partner as his coach, and I try to serve him as much as I can. But what he needs is he needs a team of people that hold him accountable to the things that he's trying to accomplish, and he does not have that. And
Mm-hmm.
as a result, his personal development and his business development is suffering. Now he's actually very successful,
Mm-hmm.
but I know it's suffering per the conversations we've had. And if he would step into that accountability with someone besides just me and
Mm-hmm.
have people that he can meet with on a weekly basis and consistently and dump things on and hear their thoughts and etc., his business will change. And so it's the same for your listeners. It's the same for them that if they don't have that, they don't have that opportunity to grow personally. And when you grow personally, your business follows. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's vital in that way. And let me just tell you real quick that the past, the thing that how I teach people how to create personal accountability,
Okay.
because it's something after doing it for 21 years that I've reverse engineered and put it into a system because it freaking works. So the word is pass, so it's PASS, and the first letter stands for passive accountability, and it's the idea of, Aaron, what is it that you want to accomplish next year? What's the big goal that you'd like to see happen next year?
Oh, are you asking me?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
please.
yeah. Well, so we'll keep it within Leaders of Leaders podcast, right? So yeah, next year I so starting 2023, I will be doing at least one interview with another podcast every single week. So then that would be 50 because I'll probably be short 2 weeks,
Right.
50 podcasts that I'm on, and then that would mean 100 uh, guests like yourself that I've interviewed, right, for Leaders of Leaders podcast. So that's a very specific one. I mean, I have other goals and other desires and other visions, but I don't want to muddy the waters too much. We'll stick with Leaders of Leaders podcast.
What's the heart behind that?
So the heart behind that is, well, I believe that Jesus Christ is the leader of leaders. And then I also believe that most leaders are leading just to gain followers. And I absolutely abhor that. I don't like
Mm.
that idea at all. I do not believe that that is God's best for a leader. I think that if a leader is leading other leaders, right, which is very much what Jesus Christ did with his disciples, even if it didn't look like it for those 3 years, but then we saw it actually in action after they fled and denied and all these things, but then realized, oh dang, he is the Messiah. He is the Christ. And everything changed after that. That was the hinge point of history. And so I believe that every leader, every person has a sphere of influence. So that makes every person a leader. And every leader, if they are pouring themselves into their spheres of influence, they will become better leaders. Right. And so that's my hope. That's my prayer. That's the vision that God has given me with the Leaders of Leaders. And so I know that if I can get onto other shows that, even if somebody plagiarizes that, like, I don't care. Like if leaders are actually accepting the responsibility of their leadership, then great. Like that is the calling. That is the vision.
Okay, cool. So you take that story
Mm-hmm.
and you summarize it in like a minute with as many people as you possibly can in the most compelling way possible. Right? So
Mm.
you tell 30, 40, 50, 100 people that
Wow.
you're able to interact with. Obviously, you can tell thousands on a podcast, but people that you interact with. And what does that do? Well, if you set a goal to lose weight, if you set a goal to do this podcast thing, if I set a goal as it relates to this community I'm trying to build, and I tell a bunch of people,
Mm.
that holds me accountable because some, maybe 10% of them will follow up and say, hey, what's going on with that podcast goal that you have as it relates to Leaders of Leaders? What's going on with your weight loss goal? What's going on with your community goal? They're going to ask you because they care. Now, again, it's only a few of them. So that's passive accountability. But in the process, you create this story. And as long as you start to project that story as a reality in your mind, your subconscious has to fix that gap between what is and what you've created and imagine so clearly. Like you've already started to imagine 100 episodes.
Mm.
Like you already kind of know what that looks like. And so your brain says, well, crap, I got to fix this gap. I need to fix this gap that it doesn't exist. But you're imagining it so clearly and sharing the story so clearly as if it's happening.
Mm.
Your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and this very clear defined story. And especially if you share the story as if it's happening, like if you journal about it as if it's
Mm.
happening, not a hope but a reality, that's passive accountability. It's both engaging your mind and engaging a bunch of people around you. Active accountability, or the A in pass, is you take from that group of people that followed up with you. So you tell 30
Mm.
people, maybe 2 or 3 follow up with you. That's a realistic number, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just
Yes,
not,
you
most
are
people don't
correct.
follow it. So you have all of a sudden now you have someone that's in your vehicle with you going, hey, your check engine's light is on. Did you notice? Hey, your check engine
Yeah.
light is on. Did you notice? You're going to do anything about it? Now they can't take your car into the shop and fix it, but they can point it out and then you can take action on it. So that active partner is someone that you meet with consistently and they ride shotgun with you at least once a week
Mm.
and point out things that are going on. But then you offer it in return. You say, hey, Joe, let's talk about business. Let's talk about life and whatever goals you have. And you hold each other accountable. And then the S in pass is structures. So these are there's a lot of different options, but so I'll just focus on two. Your calendar.
Mm.
Block out time, schedule your life, be consistent, and let your calendar. You control your calendar 100%, but it kind of controls what happens with your day, if that makes sense. So you're not letting your day dictate what happens. You dictate what happens to your day, but you use the calendar to make sure you honor it and stay accountable to it. And number two, that's well, the calendar is the people. The people
Mhm.
meetings like this is a people meeting, but then your to-do list is the things. So if your calendar represents the time you spend with people and the time you spend on trying to accomplish your goals, your to-do list represents the things that you need to put in place to do your best in those meetings and to do your best to accomplish the goals. I have so much more to say about both of those things, but that's the nutshell. So if you don't have a digital to-do list and you don't have a calendar that completely displays everything that happens in a given week, I urge you to change that habit and turn it into, when someone looks at your calendar, they know exactly what you've been up to the previous several weeks. They know exactly your habits and patterns because you're controlling that, you're owning that. Yes, you filter through what Jesus wants for you, but you own it. And then the to-do list represents all the tasks associated with those things.
Yeah, so good.
Finally, the second is self accountability. And I've got another question for you, Aaron. And I know you want to ask a question, but I'm just going to wrap up, and then
Yeah,
you can.
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I got a couple. Just yeah.
The S stands for self. The second one stands for self accountability. So, Aaron, I want you to picture a beautiful pond. Actually, no. Let's do it this way. I want you to. Have you ever done skydiving? Have you ever jumped out of an airplane?
I have, yeah.
Okay, cool. This is
Yes.
wonderful. So, bring that day back up. Okay. Now, what I want you to imagine is you're in the airplane, you're getting ready to jump out, but so you've decided that you're going to do it because you're on the plane. Like you have decided that you're going to jump out of this airplane, but you're not committed yet because what could happen? You could probably finagle your way out of it somehow. You're terrified. You could feign passing out. There's so many different ways that we get out of the things that we say we're going to do. But when you jump out of an airplane, there's this point, tandem, I'm guessing.
Well, so yeah, and I was like 3 jumps away from my A license, so I did a lot of solo jumping too.
Okay, so sure. So when you're about to jump out on your own, the wind starts hitting your face, but you could still push yourself back in, right? You could still come back into the airplane. It's when you lose gravity that there is no turning back. It's over. Like you are committed. And it's like the verse in scripture that says, I never get it right, but basically it talks about how Jesus, when a worker puts his hand to the plow, he shouldn't look back.
Yeah.
That's the level of commitment that Jesus wants us to have to the things that he puts in our lives. That level of commitment. We can't turn back. You can't climb back into that airplane once you jumped. It's impossible. And we want to commit so heavily to the goals and the vision that we've been given that you can't turn back. You have to set something up in your life so that it's almost impossible to turn back. And when you do that, now you're committed. We decide on doing things all the time. I decided last night I was going to get up at 5:30. Did I commit to doing it? No, I got up at 6 this morning. We decide to lose weight. We decide to do all kinds of things, but we don't commit. That commitment is a different thing, and that's why self-accountability requires that commitment level. So you put it all together. Passive accountability is telling a bunch of people and telling yourself a compelling story. Active accountability is meeting with people consistently. Structures is the calendar and the to-do list, and self is the commitment that you can't turn back. So that's your accountability pass.
Man, that's rad. And I would guess because who should I meet with on my calendar? What things should I do? And it seems to me that that vision that you're casting, the 1 minute, and then maybe even articulating as you journal it in real time, like this is actually happening. It seems to me that that would drive the priorities of who exactly it should be that's on your calendar, or what exactly are the things that should comprise your to-do list. Because I think I do this. Um, we have a saying in the Marine Corps. It's 7 P's, right? Perfect prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Probably don't need the piss part in there, but it's there because it's the Marine Corps. Anyways, and so what I find myself doing is professional procrastination, meaning like, oh, I'm a professional and I'm so good. So I'm always like trying to like rework and work and rework this plan, but not actually, like you said, jumping out of the airplane. Right. And so this is like the professional version of procrastination. It's like, well, I got to research this thing and then do this. And I feel like that can happen also at the calendar. It's like we're doing a bunch of menial things that aren't actually creating the impact, But at some point, it seems to me that whether it's the passive accountability or the active will come and kind of smack you in the face and be like, yo, you said you were going to jump out of the airplane and you're still chilling in the fuselage. Like, you're at the door and you haven't jumped. Like, why haven't you jumped? Is that, am I anywhere near the ballpark there? Is there a priority? I know you said you had a lot more to talk about, and we don't have to, go super deep into the weeds, but I mean, shoot, if this is just a part of the accountability of Sage, I'm guessing that if you're listening and you haven't already clicked and got the book or got some coaching set up with Kyle, you should, because clearly this is very usable information, very practically applicable for anybody right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's still one more habit. So that I gave you four habits of accountability from the book, and then there's also the mindset. So habits are the actions, but the mindsets are the what Romans 12:1 and 2. Right? God wants us to make our bodies be disciplined and committed, but then also He wants us to take our thoughts captive. So there's five mindsets that go with that. The fifth habit is an advisory board, creating a personal advisory board. And very briefly, if you're struggling still, you're still following through, you're telling people the story, and you have this compelling thing you want to do, and you're even meeting with somebody weekly, but you still can't get over the edge, it's that personal advisory board that moves you to the next level because of the way it's designed. You design it so that there's 5 to 7 people on it, and one of those persons should be dead. Okay. So and I'm not talking about Jesus. He's not dead, so it doesn't work. But anyway, one of the persons should be dead. And why I say that is I want you to find someone that is this amazing leader that you can turn to in whatever space matters to you, that you
Mm-hmm.
can look to read everything about them or as much as you can, watch their content if they've had content online, or listen to them, that kind of thing. I have someone like that in my life named Chuck Missler, and he passed away last year, or no, he passed away this year. But I've listened to so many of his sermons. He is phenomenal when it comes to the depth of what he knows in Scripture, and it
Mm-hmm.
changes my heart at a really, really deep level, intellectually and spiritually. And so he's not alive anymore, but he is a mentor to me. Then you reach out to people that you know that are good, that high level people that you can reach out to and you connect with them, call them up every once in a while, email them, text them, whatever, have conversations with them. But then the next layer is these people that are really terrifying to connect with. They're like, man, I don't know if I can have a conversation with that guy. I don't know if I can. Right? You start to have that. I don't know if I can talk to that lady. I don't know if she'd give me the time. I
Yeah.
don't care. Ask.
Yeah.
Ask
Yeah.
them. Put them on your board. Ask them some questions. That's all I'm talking about when I say personal advisory. You're just reaching out to these people consistently and asking them questions. People love to share their advice. And if they're worth being on your board, they're probably going to give you the time. Because if they're not willing to give you the time, they're not worth being on your board.
Oh,
And
I
it's that
like that.
simple. And then you move on, you find somebody else. And what it
So,
does is when you connect with people that are at that type of level, it pushes you to a new level yourself. You realize what's possible when you can be as disciplined as them, or as consistent, or whatever term you want to use that describes them.
mm,
And that takes you over the edge when you get a little bit stuck. Because I know even if you apply all these habits that I mentioned, you can still get stuck. But
oh
that
yeah.
board is that level of people and interaction really pushes you beyond.
Yeah, I love that. And so let's say, somebody has already purchased your book and they're like, but I also um I want Kyle on my advisory board. I want to be coached by him. Walk me through that. Well, number one, is coaching still open for you? Could somebody today book a coaching session or book an appointment to get and I'm not certain how it works, so I'm kind of opening that up for you to help our listeners out, or help people out that are looking for coaching, looking for a change, looking to get better, looking to be leaders of leaders, right? Looking to have this sage mindset and sage leadership. So, or whatever the new name is going to be.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, how does that work? Do they reach out to you online? Do they book a session, or is coaching closed? Or yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, for sure. So I have two avenues right now. I'm pretty pretty booked. So it's like 1 to 2 new clients I can take a month at this point for the one-to-one purpose. And that's
Mhm.
not this artificial scarcity thing. It literally is a scarcity thing.
Yeah,
I
which
don't
is
have a lot
awesome.
of space. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm busy. But I also am starting up this membership. And the intention behind the membership, it's primarily focused on blue collar business owners that are Christians. They're
Mhm.
believers and they want to grow their business. So the onboarding with a one-to-one or with one of these people in the membership would be a 30-minute conversation. We dive into what the heck's going on with their business, the struggles, the victories, all that stuff. We really get into it. But with the membership, what it's about is I that vision was thousands of business owners to shift their mindsets and habits so God can transform their hearts. But then
Mhm.
he gave me another one, which is a whole nother story that we don't have time for. But he gave me another one in a coffee shop with this random dude named Dave. And I started crying in the middle of a coffee shop with this random dude named Dave. So I knew that I needed to listen to this vision. And what it is growing up blue car business, working with a lot of guys that get into the trades, and now coaching a lot of business owners that are in the blue collar world. I love that mentality and I love that group a lot.
Mhm.
Like my heart is very much for them. But what happens is in those industries, there's a lot of people that are rough, that are rough. You've
That's
got,
putting it lightly.
yeah, and you've got the
Uh,
language rough, you've got the history rough, all kinds of stuff is rough
mhm.
there. But there's these people that are running businesses that really genuinely love their employees and they want to help them in their lives and they want to influence them in their lives, but they need to run a successful business for any of it to work. And so the idea behind the membership is that people would join that care about Jesus and leading like him and ministering to those employees that they have and ministering in their marketplace as that type of leader. And we get those folks together, we mastermind together because somebody in Idaho and somebody in Washington aren't in competition, but if they're both in landscaping, they can converse and talk and they can pray with one another, right? So I'm creating that community coming up in 2023 because ultimately I'm going to open a nonprofit that's just like the one I ran 9 years or for 9 years or part of for 9 years. I want to open it up here because there's still 18 to 25-year-olds that are very off track in life that need
Yeah,
support. So,
100%.
very long answer to your question, but one, connect with me, go to my website, and I do a coaching session, a legit coaching session to introduce you because I want you to know what you get if you work with me. So, I do a full on coaching session so people understand that. And then we talk about whether we're going to work together or not. And then on the membership, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, hey, who are you? Is it okay for that person, from my perspective, to be in this group? Because it's a very serious group. It's a very God honoring group. So that's what I'm looking for. That's how I go about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Kyle, I just have to say, man, the Sage uh, mindset or Sage program or framework that you've put together, um, like already, even just with that, just the accountability piece, and you dove into it, and not even to its full depth. Of course, we only have so much time on here. Already totally applicable, totally puts real handles on it that you can really actually move it forward with some, with some real actions that I can take, some thoughts that I can think, and some writing that I can do, some words that I can speak. And so I got to say, I really appreciate that. I know that there's a lot of times you get on a podcast, or not you, but I'll get on a podcast or I'll interview somebody, and everybody's holding super tight. And so the fact that you're open with that, and sharing that, it just showcases, I think, the value that is. I mean, if that's the same with the self-awareness, if that's even deeper with the accountability, the same with the growth, the same with empowerment, obviously some pretty radical and awesome handles to be able to move that forward. And so, yeah, obviously you guys got it in the show notes, the link to his site. Go check in, go see what's up. If you want to still kick the tires, he's got a book. Am I correct in that? Right, your book,
Um,
and that's available on your site, or is that available outside of
Amazon,
that as
Barnes
well?
Noble, yeah, Amazon, Barnes Noble, various other retailers, and then you can link to it from my site. But yeah,
Awesome. Yeah. So thanks again. Absolutely honored to have you on, Kyle. Thank you so much for just sharing from your heart, sharing some, very concreting stories that help us see this stuff actually happen or in action, or just help us see, as all of us are potential leaders, should we take that step of faith, have that vision, cast that vision, as we get called from God. So thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.